course, as at least a couple of you mentioned last time. So we do have that draft language. We didn't want to place it into these sections since it sounded like there was some contention and that it isn't the existing language. So I can see if there's specific language to that section. I don't
just
know
like for a point of reference, if we're going to be changing the language, it would be nice just to see, even if that's not the route we go.
Okay. So looking to potentially just define some of those terms. That way you think would be helpful. Is anyone else?
This opens you up to anything at any time from anyone, which I don't know how you do that. It's written in a way that, what do they do with the vineyards? Like when they spray sulfur in the night? Is there a language for that kind of stuff? Anybody know?
Kathleen, I think this is unrelated to spraying though. It's more about just the general odor.
Yeah, I'm just saying that related to the smell of sulfur, because I have a bunch of emails from people in Jerusalem Valley that talk about this. I'm not even complaining about it, I'm just trying to figure it out.
Okay, and I know, currently we have the requirements, of course, for indoor to have all the filtration systems, but for outdoor, it's really just the setbacks.
I think also Margot had brought up last time we started to discuss this, that any considerable number of persons, like if you're in a location where there's a lot of folks around you, then maybe that works. But if you're in a location where you're the only neighbor, then are you considerable if you're the only person being affected, et cetera, so I know we'd had some conversation about it.
Can you pull up a copy of that?
I can, yeah, I understood it's not our starting point for this ordinance, but I can, yes,
Well, it doesn't even be used as a starting point, but just to see.
an example. Anybody else have any other thoughts or discussion points for this one?
Aside from those much more important questions, I found the language cannabis related permits shall not propagate objectionable odors to the order of the year that up from the trees or donated grown sites or whatever the more specific terminology that
The permit itself is paper.
correct.
Does that mean an unpermitted place can have all of these odor options?
No, I meant totally just the permit stuff. Yeah.
It feels like you need a
Premises.
particulate count or you get rid of it. So I don't know what you do with all that. What do we get? Is there a particulate count you go off of that? Even that's, I just don't understand you enforce anyways.
Well, I think there's several options. It has to be quantified in some way. It's going to be included, not necessarily by particulate counts, but if you have, however many complaints of some, I don't know, there has to be some sort of quantification.
If I'm a grower, I want to take that thing, because I'm telling you right now, where we live, we have cannabis grows around us. There's a very nice gated community on the south end of my property, which is half a mile away. And they complain about us all the time. And we don't grow. So I'm like, well, they're on the other, they're even further away than what we think they are. And we get comments like this all the time. And it doesn't bother me personally, I don't, it's at. But these people, and I'm just saying, they're probably at least a half a mile from the road. My property, 2 more, and then there they are. So if you don't give a specific data point, I don't know how, because people love to complain about this stuff. And the way this is written, there's so many words in here that go any direction you want them to go.
I think the other hard thing is, and it is related to unpermitted, because we had an inspection in 2018 by Air Quality Board as part of that process, and we pulled up the Google Earth and there was like 12 unpermitted grows surrounding us. So it's like, well,
Adding.
how do you attribute the odor from one farm to another?
Even if you can quantify where's the source.
Particularly with the sort of our terrain and the microclimates and the way that the wind goes through the hills around that, yeah.
I mean, I would just like to see this
Yeah.
removed.
So I did find, the section that was in this draft 73 related to outdoor, most of it's related to indoor, but, it's pretty lengthy, but at the heart of it is, not creating a nuisance due to odor that is disturbing to people of normal sensitivity. Any cannabis odor shall not be equal to or greater than 7 dilution threshold, I hope I'm saying it right, DT, when measured by the county with a field olfactometer at the property line, which the cannabis is cultivated or proposed for a minimum of 2 olfactor observations, not less than 15 minutes apart. So there is, it looks like based on this, there is a way to measure it, sort of like we can measure noise. So that's what was included previously to answer.
I find that difficult because if it was measurable, the air quality control board would have already put that in place and then they would maintain their annual $15,000 a year permit. Well, I think part of that could be like they don't have the staff to do it or they don't have the equipment or they, yeah, there's many reasons why that might not be. But I am interested in the normal, people of normal sensitivity language that's in there. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, also. That's pretty much it. The continued odor in excess of 7 DT 1 hour upon retesting will constitute a violation of this section. Blah, 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 blah.
And it is when we have so much unlicensed cannabis, so it's just, I just don't know how accurate that's gonna be, because the outdoor season's the outdoor season, so it's just gonna be really difficult to say, okay, yeah, this smell's coming from this farm. Sure, so.
And I don't know that it would do us any good. I understand the logic behind just removing the section and not having any language here, but like from a public perspective, I mean, I think that would probably ruffle some feathers. So maybe this could be reframed, and instead of being worded the way that it is, maybe it could say something like cannabis permittees shall take reasonable measures to mitigate odors, et cetera, something like that. You know, so you're not generally disregarding people's concerns. You're still including some language in here, but it's not, you know, it's not structured like this, right? So you'd have something there that says, there's something in every conditions of use. That talks about this.
Yeah, I'm looking at the state requirements.
It's required as a part of the property management plan. Again, typically it's easier to sort of wrap your head around controlling it in an indoor environment.
Yeah, you can employ scrubbers and things like that. Yeah. They've done a lot of work on that carpentry.
I'd be interested to know public announcement.
So we're just not doing this for us, try to assessments of alcohol. So the Cannabis Control Board is actually also permitting category exemptions. So how would that be with some of the assessments that we're talking about? Then going to the permit list, going to be entitled by, or maybe exempted from the Cannabis Control Board itself.
From the state licensing, I was under the impression that they also use our mitigated index typically, or whatever our CEQA level is. Or maybe I'm not understanding the question.
So there's a project that we have, and so we got issued a categorical exemption regarding, you know, as far as some of the environmental assessments that they have to go through in order to get that. research that making sure that they're not to get that seed.
From us?
No,
Okay,
from the board, the county,
Okay.
the state, right, and the state issue.
okay.
So if there's some of those things that have to be looked into from the county itself, does the state, who can give these CEs, that's my question. If they're able to give categorical exemptions to certain projects and getting them to bypass some of this, the secret requirements, can they do that with some of these other environmental assessments that need to be done? And also issue a permit?
I mean, they do have their own discretionary power as far as CEQA goes, but is anyone else aware of what I don't know what they're issuing with CEs, what that would be for, unless anybody else is aware.
This was the
I have
first thing that
the whole
happened. This
project,
just happened to me.
or-
It's my
So-
very first one, so I'm not even really sure how to deal with
Usually
this,
it's
but.
not how it works.
So
Right.
there's a couple ways. I have a project that's categorically exempt on one of my projects.
Okay.
And, so it was just, it's categorically exempt.
Right.
And then I have another project where it, as part of, it's different because the county has a programmatic EIR. So it's included in the language there that cannabis is known to have odors and it is, I can know anything about term. It's a mitigated declaration. So,
But it's included in their assessment.
it's included in their assessment, and so it's not a separate line item in, the regulations. So I think it's really hard for this to be in the regulations when it's something that really falls upon the CEQA analysis of the project. Because odor might be an issue in certain projects, right? Like if you've got, myself in the face here, but if you've got 100 acres of ag land surrounded by residents, yeah, like you have the right, but is it the right thing to do? And so sometimes, that may pop in a CEQA analysis. So other counties tend on the odor to defer to whether it's a project CEQA analysis or programmatic EIR.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring this up for the fact that because that's impacting tribal culture, it's literally like in an actual site. And somehow the state board, right, is the one that made the determination that, oh, well, this is exempt without reaching out to us or to even doing any kind of research or any kind of analysis. If they would have done every agency that they crunched it from, they would have gotten the same information we would have given. They wouldn't have met the requirements for CE, but they made a determination anyway.
So
I'm just concerned, like if there's these other, categories that they also have to be assessed. And that now the control board is making determinations of permits. How is that going to conflict with some of the requirements for what the county's doing?
how does the state license tribal projects? Are they licensing tribal projects?
Well,
Or are they just giving the CEQA exemption?
we're giving the CEQA exemption, but there's also a permit that comes with that. If you get an exemption, then you're basically saying, okay, well, there's no impacts, especially for a CE, right? And that you can go forward with this, that permit gives you the authority. The only thing that's holding this up is that they also need an encroachment to the Department of Transportation to get into the utility plans.
So, but I'm confused because the state can issue out the licenses it wants, but it's the county, it's the municipality
Right?
that actually has the final say. So what's
Right,
up
no.
with the tribal land?
Yeah, well, this is non-tribal.
Oh,
Yeah, so for clarification, it's not a permit that the tribe received for something. It's a permit that another permanent cannabis grow is going in on a site that had tribal
involved.
Yeah. That had.
That had
and
cultural
that's not
differences on it.
exactly- there you go.
Oh, okay, okay.
We could
For the
talk about
rewind
that.
there. Thank you. Yeah.
Specifically
I'm
too,
sorry,
like,
I'm
I'm
probably
curious to know.
But I
what
just
that is,
didn't
but yeah.
know, like, as far as like, the state
Typically-
is getting involved now in submitting or in approving CEs, right, on certain assessment categories.
No, because there was a time where you could get a provisional license, and that time has passed. And now every municipality has to have a CEQA process, whether it's an EIR for the whole program, a programmatic EIR, or if it's site specific. Right now in Lake, we're still site specific.
Mhm.
So they shouldn't, the state doesn't do that anymore, or isn't supposed to be.
But they still have to make their CEQA determinations at just like, Fish and Wildlife does, for example, for their LSAs. And typically, it's easy for them and they rely on the
Right.
county's
Yeah.
CEQA.
Right.
So that's what I thought the state was doing as well, but maybe that's just a one-off. I'm not sure. We could talk about that. Okay, yeah, I'm curious.
Good.
I also just noticed that if this is helpful in the PMP section, it starts on page 27, 129 of the actual ordinance, Article 27. The air quality is the first section required in the PMP, and it talks about odor and complaints. And again, it doesn't necessarily help, for lack of a better word, for outdoor, but that is the other section that it's included in specifically for complaints. And this section is listed with all of these others as far as electric, odor, pesticides, lights. That's currently how it's structured in front of everything. And then the ordinance goes into more detail, mostly in the property management plan about each of these items.
So if a grow is doing, an outdoor grow is situated in a legal place, everything's fine, they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing, and there's a bunch of complaints. What are they going to do? What can they, how do you mitigate? And I work on a lot of ranches, a lot of farms, I'm just thinking about, but I think all these smells we get, what can they actually do or be required to do? Is there anything? Let go where, we put it where you said we can put it, and
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it just gets tricky. Because like you said, if they're meeting all of the codes in their conditions, there's sometimes there's not much we can do as a lead agency. And as I understand, air quality is not here to speak for themselves, but they don't go out and like measure it. I know that's come up a bunch, so.
But is your question in regard to like traditional agricultural operations?
my question is just in general,
Because you mentioned like horse manure.
yeah, well, I'm thinking of smells that people complain about, and people complain about everything. So, and some of it's legit, and some of it's just what it is, and you can acknowledge it and move on, but I'm just saying, if a cannabis grower is doing everything they possibly can do to make it, putting it in the right, doing all these things, it seems like this right here, this paragraph region is gonna be just nonstop.
Trying to protect land use rights.
Right. Well, I mean, it seems like a common sense thing, I guess, to me, that this right here just creates something that, I mean, we can't do anything with it anyway, right? We kind of can't do anything with this. So I guess my question is the point of that.
And there is.
The language as it is, it creates more problems than it ever solves. But then again, what do we do? So if you can't point to, you get 20 people complaining, then this grow must do this. What's the,
I think it's addressed in the CEQA analysis of each project, and that's where we should leave it.
same with that. This just seems to be adding some,
Even then, as far as enforcement, there's not, I mean,
yeah.
there's not much we can do. I mean, I hate
So,
See it that way,
so I
but-
just think you'll face some backlash from the Pope if you just remove the whole section. So what I would recommend doing is kind of a combination of those. If there's language in the CEQA analysis, take that and say like, the project shall meet all requirements as outlined in whatever, right? So that there's something here, but it's not expanding upon anything that doesn't, that already exists, right? So it's basically a reference back to that, but you're not taking this whole section away. I think that's like scary to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would
It just seems more honest to the public to refer back then.
But can you open it up for public comments?
Yep. Go ahead and open the public comment for the odor item in A3. Is there anybody I can't see that far? Oh, there's someone in the room. Go ahead and just state your name.
Carolyn Holman. I have to say anything, but she was pregnant with them. And, but also maybe put some wording or similar to other ordinances, like the other ag for animals. If it's the same, along the same lines, then you're meeting other public, concerns with like animal owners or farms. I mean, we don't have massive horse farms or massive cow farms up here, but, you know, manure can smell quite pungent sometimes. So,
They're definitely in hog farms, so.
right, so, I think something like that.
Thank you. For anybody in the Zoom?
Sarah Bodner.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi there, good afternoon. This is Sarah Bodner, consultant. This is it's a hard topic because we're talking about regulating something that a natural process. And typically we see agriculture categorically as exempt from these kinds of nuisance complaints because of the nature of agriculture, which is that sometimes it's stinky, sometimes it's messy, and that's an understood part of the agricultural economy and community. And we're in this difficult place with cannabis in that we're considered an agricultural product by the County of Lake, but we're not treated like the rest of agriculture. So it creates kind of a double standard. What I with the projects that I have moved through planning commissions and the permitting process is that odor is handled on a case-by-case basis. The geography and the topography of the county is super diverse. And when the commission is hearing a project and when staff are bringing forth a project, they're typically looking at proximity and wind patterns and all of the factors that are unique to that property and recommending mitigations based on that. Every single project I've had come forward, they've considered impact of odor, and then if they think it's going to be an issue for neighbors, have made case-by-case recommendations around things like planting vegetative screening that may help impact the flow of wind, for example, or planting other kinds of aromatic herbs that could mitigate it. So I think, my recommendation is that we continue with how the county is currently considering odor, leave it open and allow for case-by-case consideration for each farm. And I will just say it's an incredibly subjective and difficult thing to regulate, but that is the nature of nature. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then Justin, I'm so sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, Quayle.
You should be able to unmute yourself, Justin, if you can hear us.
It should be.
Justin, if you can hear us, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak for public comment on odor. What?
Sorry, I needed help to get it. I got it, I think.
No problem.
Did I get it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Justin Quayle, Quayle, but I agree with the woman before. It needs to be really case by case. The closer the city, you're going to have more problems with the smell. But if it's an agriculture business, what can you really do? I mean, we are in agriculture, in Lake County, at least, we're agriculture in the size of the mass of our canopy. I'm way out in the middle of the woods where I'm not going to have my closest neighbor, I don't know, is a half mile or a mile away. I probably won't have as much of a problem with the smell part, but people that are growing it year round, it will get annoying. And that's a big part of growing and expanding in our area. If we want to expand where people live and where people come to move to this county, because it is a beautiful county, we need to be more, it needs to be more on top of the smell thing, closer to communities. If you're on 100 acres, maybe even move your grow to more to the center, so you have a farther distance away from people that are living, but that's hard to do when we're in agriculture business. So I agree with the woman before. I think it's really base by base right now. Thank you.
Holly Harris.
Hi, Holly. We should be able.
I think I'm unmuted right now. Holly Harris. So I just had a couple of things. First of all, I thought at the last meeting that Maria said that she was going to contact Air Quality for their input. And so I wanted to know if Air Quality has been contacted, because obviously they do get contacted if there are problems, just to see if they have any input on this. I also wanted to point out that, where we are, it's kind of a unique experience because we are on the lake. And so there is absolutely no vegetation between anything. So depending upon which way the wind blows, luckily it's usually headed in the other direction. I also, I'm assuming and I believe that it's not legal, but we have had issues with people burning cannabis down here. So that's another consideration in terms of odor. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly.
And that's all on the Zoom, right?
Yeah, Margo, go ahead.
I have a public comment, and then a neighbor asked me to read the public comment. Oh, my first public comment is, I think we have an opportunity to find what best practices are. And in just one article I found in Processing Magazine in October 28, 2022, this article says, the title is, Cannabis is here to stay. Its unpleasant odors are not. And this, again, is in Processing Magazine. But it brings up three major points. And one is, it's best to deal with the issues of odor before the growth starts. Because once the grow is in, it's really hard to talk about mitigation or how to correct it. And a lot of municipalities find out the hard way that you have complaining neighbors. That is a headache, and that is hard to solve. So it's best to, from the very start, identify, okay, what, and define what is the problem, what is acceptable. Like, well, what Richmond was saying, yeah, let's get down to metrics. And again, I think getting Air Quality into the room to find out why, what are the barriers of getting such equipment? What is the barrier to deploying such equipment? Because that would take the subjectivity out of it. And then just to get more information saying, how can we work out a feasible solution? So, the growers can grow and the neighbors can continue to enjoy their property. So the other thing to keep in mind is the same article pointed out that in outdoor grows, that odor, that can travel for a mile to more than a mile. So that's something that really we would want to get a handle on from the start, rather than saying, we'll play catch up and we'll try to fix it later. And then thank you, Rebecca, for remembering my comment about considerable number of neighbors. Yeah, because some of us, we enjoy living out in the country and we like the low population density, and our rights to our property and to enjoy our property should not be diminished because we choose to live in a less dense area than our neighbors who like to live in Kent. Now, that takes me to my neighbor's comment. Lucinda Wilson had a prior commitment and she asked me to read her comment. So I'm reading from her email. And Lucinda says, my husband and I live 800 feet from a cannabis grow on Bell Hill Road called North Coast Select. We have lived here for 40 years and have always enjoyed our proximity to Highland Springs Reservoir for hiking, fishing, and simply the natural beauty of the park. We would like to express our concern for the potential odor from outdoor and indoor grows. When North Coast Select went through the planning process, we followed it closely, and while we had concerns, we thought that because it was an indoor grow and they planned to keep farming the vineyards around it, the impact on us would be small. The construction of what we expected to be a hoop house was a shock, as a 277,200 cubic feet, 22 feet tall greenhouse was erected. It is an impressive structure, the first of what we eventually supposed to be 12. Once growing commenced in 2023, we were very disappointed to be affected by the odor. And this is pungent odor from an indoor grow in what appears to be a state-of-the-art greenhouse. Looking again at the project property management plan, it appears that there should be adequate air filtering so why the smell? That began a long process of complaints from us to the Community Development Department and Air Quality Control, and concluded with our being told that no action would be taken and that North Coast Select was in fact one of the cleanest, well-operated grows in the county. While it seems that most people object to the odor at a grow at certain points in the growing cycle, smell is subjective. And we are the only close neighbors of this particular grow. While we continue to log dates and times when the smell is bad, there is no objective measure that we can use. Code enforcement said that there is a scientific tool that can measure odor, but we were told by Air Quality Control that County of Lake did not have such a tool. Our experience led us to research what health and environmental problems might be associated with the odor of a cannabis grow. To paraphrase from a publication created by Denver Public Health and Environment Department, quote, Cannabis Environmental Best Management Practices Guide, end quote. Cannabis plants naturally emit terpenes, which are volatile organic compounds, VOCs. VOCs react with oxides of nitrogen in the presence of sunlight to create ground level ozone, a pollutant that is dangerous to human health and environment. Thank you for your consideration, Linda and William Wilson. Thank you.
Can you give me the size of that greenhouse again?
127,000.
Square feet?
Or cubic feet, including vertical.
There's how many?
Pardon?
How many of those things?
It is. Well, 22 feet tall,
Thought you said 12, Mark.
yeah, I think so. I was trying to get, yeah, 1 of 12.
Were there any other, is that another hand up, Ruby?
There's 2 more.
Oh, okay.
No more in the room.
Oh, sorry. Why don't you go ahead, Carolyn, and then we can go back to Zoom.
I just wanted to add on, just, we're not making a differentiation between indoor and mixed light versus outdoor. So maybe something wording in there to differentiate. Most other counties within the state, outdoor doesn't have restrictions and indoor does.
Thank you.
And then Willie Zepeda.
Go ahead, should be able to unmute yourself. I think you already are, Chief.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so there's the item on the agenda for the Board of Supervisors. So air quality is going to be having some partial office closures, decreased staff, and decreased services. So you might want to get a hold of Doug sooner than later for the air quality support because they're going to be decreasing what they're going to be able to do. So just kind of a heads up, and may delay some of the stuff you're working on.
Thank you.
And then one more, I believe it's Angela. Angela, go ahead.
Thank you, Rui. Yes, this is Angela. For the odor, I was just wondering if there was going to be anything addressing, I know at one of the Board of Supervisors meetings, one of the areas that they had wanted to protect from the odor was the scenic corridors. Because even though you can't see it, you're not supposed to be able to see it from the scenic corridors. But they were concerned about the odor. Because there are tourists that come to the county that do find it objectionable, and not necessarily neighbors, but general public. I just wanted to know if there was going to be anything that addressed the scenic corridors. Thank you.
Thank you.
And those are all the items in this one.
Okay, yes, we'll go ahead and close public comment for that. Sorry,
That's right.
Oh, that's right, go ahead, Carol.
I know we're talking about cannabis. What about the hemp? Because you can see the hemp farms and their restrictions aren't as strict as cannabis. So if you're going down a corridor, not everybody's educated to know that that's hemp or that's cannabis.
It's the same plant, so it's confusing them, I imagine.
So let's just make that work.
Thank you. Oh, we've got two more hands, it's like, you can go ahead and leave, Ruby, I can't read that far.
Yeah. So, Andrew Dobbs. You can unmute.
We can hear you.
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Andrew, if you can hear us, it looks like you're unmuted and it's your opportunity to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to echo some of the other comments that have been made today with regards to sort of the number of sources of odor you might have. It's very difficult in the field to truly isolate the source of odor in a concrete fashion, especially when you've got unlicensed cultivation nearby, potentially hemp cultivation, or even a neighbor's personal cultivation. So I think even, with the olfactometers and the more scientific measures, trying to determine, which way the wind is blowing and where that odor really came from is not really doable in an objective manner. So I really would suggest that we stick to, measurable concrete requirements that are already in the ordinance, like property line setback, et cetera. And if there are complaints, I'm sure those will be logged on the use permit and reviewed at renewals. So I suggest we try to stay away from, more subjective measures such as, a considerable number of folks. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Looks like it just says guest, but there's a telephone number of 281-6205. You are now allowed to speak.
All right. Yes, if you could please state your name and it's your turn to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. This is Bart Levinson. What I'd like to see you all consider is bringing this discussion to the area town halls and to get some sense from the public of how they are concerned they will be affected, and have a time of public discussion about this issue. Where I live, there's about to be a very large grow going in, and it totally depends on where in this large property this large grow is going to be. It could be very close to me, and I get very affected by smell. I get migraines. This could be really life-changing for me. I can imagine also there are two issues. People who own their properties already and don't know that cannabis can come in next to them. This can be a very big thing, and it deserves sensitivity and some gathering of information from the public, and also presenting what are the options. I heard somebody say, could there be screening? Well, that sounds like a good idea. Could there? Could there be other crops planted that help buffer the smell? I don't think that you can be as loose and cavalier as you're being about the odor of cannabis. It is going to affect some people, and it is going to affect property values, and it's going to affect people's ability to peacefully live on their own land. This is a big deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that did
about this?
Zoom?
No, no more hands raised.
Okay, Marco, go ahead.
Thanks. I don't have answers, but it's something to consider as the county is really concerned about economic development. And we're looking at tourism, a lot of visitor dollars to come in. Right now, I don't think we have a huge cannabis odor problem. We should try to keep it that way. And so as, you know, we go through revising the ordinance, let's put in place measures that will keep the county attractive and alluring to visitors. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless there's any other hands in the Zoom or the room, we'll go ahead and close public comment for the odor item at 1:56. Is that one?
It was like Willie's hand went up and then Willie's hand went down, so. You can see that part? I just got new glasses.
Nice.
I'll go
Sorry,
ahead.
that was a pocket hand raise.
Gotcha. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and close public comment on that item and bring it back to the task force for potentially a motion. I'll remind you the motions for consideration are A through D, and of course, any of those could be amended as the task force sees fit. We're amending the language, maintaining it, moving it, removing it, or any combination of it. Tabling it.
So if I'm understanding this right, there is an odor section in every condition of approval as part of the CEQA for each permit. Is that right? Or is this is in addition to that?
Typically, we do have a condition of approval and mitigation measures for air quality, particularly when it's indoor. But even when it's outdoor, I can't say as a blanket statement for every project if we end up with mitigation for those. The set beyond the complaints and having to, address those.
I think it makes sense to address it once per project rather than having dual language that could get confusing for people.
I'd like to say something. I think one of the concerns that I would have was like, we're talking about, putting some other type of vegetation in. Kind of depends on what that is. How big is that, right? As far as for some of the CEQA assessments that have to happen as far as for tribal, there are also viewscapes that come from ceremonial areas and those kind of things. And if that's going to be impacted, then that would be something that would have to be mitigated. So I'm just kind of, I get it. I don't think there's issue now, but if that's one of the mitigations that's going to happen, what does that look like as far as new vegetation to be able to back up? What does that look like? What kind of vegetation are we talking about? Mm-hmm. So that can be impacted by the assessment that we'll have to talking about this.
And more than Jones. I feel like this is 73.4 is restrictions and prohibited activities. This sounds more like a condition and not a restriction or a prohibited activity. I would like to see this moved to conditions of approval, and that they adhere to CEQA. Because it is within those conditions where that odor is acknowledged. And I don't think that odor, it just, ultimately, it needs to be addressed and to hear the citizens' concerns. I just don't feel like this is the right spot for it. Because I don't know how we prohibit it or restrict it.
thought or question, sort of response to actually both of the last two. So by moving it, does that somehow then remove a tool that the public or other neighbors or whomever has to try and address issues like this? Because if we put it under the conditions of approval, it feels like what Mr. Geary brought up earlier about categorical exemptions could then have a greater impact on whether or not this language or its impact is even there, right? I mean, maybe I misunderstood some of that earlier.
We can no longer have categorical exemptions, which is why that situation is particularly.
Sure, fair enough.
Yeah. Is there somewhere else in Article 73 where it fits? It's not under this section. I think it belongs in conditions.
Air quality is,
I mean, we're trying to reduce the onerous of this process on the county and use the state's work instead of duplicating efforts. And this is handled in the state CEQA analysis. So.
And if I may, I know, go ahead.
I mean, these are the actual regulations that we're writing, and this just feels subjective and unregulatable. So then, would we think about maybe removing this language and putting in something like odor concerns will be addressed in XYZ? Like, I think this is a document of reference that also people, not necessarily people who are applying, but people in the public are using. That might be a way for them to just like see a link to somewhere else or so, so that they're like, oh, odor isn't addressed at all in Article 73. That might be a bad look.
yeah, and I totally get what you're saying. I just don't know
what the mechanism would be.
I know we're not supposed to chime in too much as staff or try to sway anyone, but I will say I see what everyone's saying, but to your point about listing it in prohibited and restricted, whatever the word is, if you look at the remaining items, it's about like not using generators as a primary, having lights inside, down,
It's all actionable things.
Right.
It really is truly like prohibiting and regulating certain items. So maybe it does make sense to refer back to, a property management plan, CEQA analysis or conditions. And I know I'm not supposed to interject too much, so that's all I'll say, but I think it does make sense.
Do we have guidelines for the property management plan in the regulations? So maybe that's where we put this is.
Yeah. It starts on page, again, this is of the actual ordinance, but it's page 27, 129, starts property management plan at the bottom. And the first item is air quality. And we will also be getting into those items at task force as we move through the ordinance and get to those sections as well.
And the first item in the PMP is air quality.
Correct.
Yeah. If it's already there, then I think we're leaving it. Makes sense. I mean, we could refer, but again, that's under, still having it under, restrictions and prohibited uses. Yeah, it's confusing and if it's already addressed, my inclination would be to go with the motion.
And it's not saying we don't care about odor, or we're not going to regulate it. It's just saying potentially if the task force chooses that it doesn't belong in that prohibited section.
Did Maria impart upon you any specific wisdom regarding this item?
Oh, we chat about it a lot. She said, are there any controversial items? And I said, oh no, just odor and proximity exclusion areas. No, so no specific direction from her. And I think she would sort of be saying the same thing because even if, we brought air quality back or something, I don't know how much what kind of position they're in to say yes or no to being able to measure things, or, I mean, even that could be a recommendation of the task force if they wanted, you all wanted the board or staff to look into things like that.
It seems like we need a core metric for this. I know it won't be popular in cannabis, like totally get that. But if the public knows these are the parameters, you give them something, and me being part of the public, obviously. But if there's no core metric to this, it just all is meaningless, and it goes throughout the entire document. If there's nothing to go back to say, I'm having a bunch of complaints, and I used to do this with smokers and stuff in Alaska. You can walk by their property within a certain distance where the property line is. There were complaints, even we didn't know it was them. We could walk by and we could tell you the particular cannabis company had and we would take these readings and then we'd pass them off to them. And they would tell us. And even knowing that that could happen, if you're a neighbor, you understand that once every quarter, whatever it is, you make the walk during certain parts of the season, things are coming in, cannabis is in full bloom, heat's hot, all these things. You can walk by property lines and you can just like they do with power meters, anything else.
Yeah.
And I'm just telling you, if you don't have a metric, none of this to me makes any sense. And I don't care how many people complain. And I'm listening to these comments going, I agree with them. And I'm listening to what we're saying here and I agree with that. But if there's no metric, even though it'll be messy, at least it'll give us something to build off of. Without that, we are literally in the dark every time. And we won't grow. There won't be any changes because what would the changes be? To what? We have no metric to go off of. I'm only concerned, and we get a lot of these complaints in the valley, Jerusalem Valley, a lot. And I don't know what you do with any of it if you don't have a metric to go off. And that's a whole nother, and I know that it's a whole nother issue, but at least it would give you something we can actually, look at and be reasonable about and understand it's agriculture and at least something to go off of. If the county doesn't do that, I don't see where this goes from there, except people that are really pissed off.
Because even in the CEQA analysis, it's tricky sometimes with several subject areas, not just air quality, but even like, traffic or aesthetics. It's like what's substantial, and CEQA has definitions of that, but there's competing opinions and definitions of that as well, so it can be tricky. Anyways.
So I would like to make a motion that we get facts and figures from air quality to see if there are numbers that are enforceable, and then make our decision based upon that.
Not only if there's figures, but we just heard from Willie that like they're cutting their staff in half. So great if there's numbers, but if they can't send anybody out there to measure it.
Yeah, okay, bottom line, I'd like their input.
Yeah.
So,
I think a friendly modification of the motion, because the waiver air quality can address not only metrics, but like spatial specificity of those measurements, that seems relevant too, because I hear both of them, well, the two sitting across from me, right, saying, like, how do you measure it, but also how do you know that the measurement you're getting is coming from where you think it's coming? Yeah. And I think that's pretty relevant. So,
Yeah, same, then all of that's there for noise. Okay.
So is that a motion to vote on and then move forward like to the board potentially, or is it more of a table
input from air quality?
Okay, so table it to the next meeting really, or.
Well, if we can't get their input at next meeting, it won't do us any good to revisit it next meeting.
Right.
So
I just want to be clear that it's not like a motion to get that and then have staff
no.
carry on and go to the board. It's a motion to bring it back to the task force.
Yes.
Yes. Right. Okay, so there's a motion in second. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, so I have a motion to, this is not perfectly worded, but check with air quality to see what sort of metrics and guidance we can get on odor and bring it back. And then our next item, number 4, is electrical generators. It's on the same page 27 of the packet. There's some language related to cannabis cultivation, not relying on gas generators as a primary source of power. and only to be used temporarily in the event of a power outage or emergency that is beyond the permitting's control. We have 20 more minutes still.
I move to maintain the current language of the section. Second that.
Okay, we have, I can't type fast enough. We have a,
Public comment?
thank you. We do need to do public comment. Thank you. Lucy, go ahead and
Got excited. Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you. The first line of that, the indoor and mixed light cultivation of cannabis shall not rely. I was just wondering if we would consider changing the first part up to the word shall to say all commercial cannabis activities with the exception of those in compliance with Ordinance 3135, which is a temporary hoop house, shall not rely on personal gasoline, blah, blah. So changing indoor or mixed light cultivation to all commercial cannabis activities with the exception of those in compliance with Ordinance 3135. And then also at the end of that section, adding in that emergency use shall be reported to CDD and should not exceed more than 72 hours without CDD approval. Just so that it's being monitored if it is an excessive outage. Also, if we can consider adding in language that generators should be insulated to reduce noise. If you live in these hills, you know that a generator can be heard for miles. So any type of language that we can add so that they should be insulated to reduce the noise pollution would be great. Thank you.
Looking at you on that, Paul.
thank you.
I know, I'm thinking.
I can
Is
see.
there any other public comment?
Yeah. And then Sarah Bodnar, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, this is Sarah Bodnar, consultant. I couldn't hear what the motion was made in the room. Could you repeat that and then I'll make my comment?
They're moving at lightning speed. The motion was to maintain the current language and then we open public comment.
Okay. Yeah, it was just the sound didn't come through. Thank you. So this is one of the really kind of tricky ones as we're moving projects forward because based on the zoning in Lake County, many properties don't have power already existing to the property. And one of the timing things that's tricky with cannabis is that PG&E won't consider a new power drop until you have been awarded your use permit. And then it takes a long time. And so we have seen a lot of kind of what I would call hybrid projects move forward, where we allow generators for a temporary time period and then also some solar and kind of find out what's going to work for the site. And I just want to make sure we maintain that flexibility and that, people want to get on power as soon as possible. They want to get solar installed, but sometimes there's a need for temporary use of generators. And this is, just to reiterate, this is something that's allowed by the state of California, and they have specs around the generators you can use. And I would encourage that we continue to maintain compliance with the state of California to that end. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
And then Holly Harris.
Go ahead, Holly.
Well, hi there. I just wanted to agree with what Angela had to say. And once again, since this is an area that air quality, I believe they put out the permits, et cetera, for it. If they've been consulted on this for, for any reason. Thank you.
That's all public comment. That's all the public comment in Zoom.
Okay, was there any public comment in the fiscal room? Go ahead, Margo.
So if the task force feels strongly about retaining the current language, I would recommend that we strike the term indoor and mixed light, because that turns out to be sowing more confusion than people who are in cultivation think that, oh, restrictions on generators don't apply to us, and then that's not the intent of the original
ordinance for this section. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything about, we done with public comment?
I believe so. That's all the public comment on this item. For now, we'll go ahead and close it at 2:15 and bring it back to the task force. We have a motion and a second thus far.
I was going to amend my
Perfect.
motion, because I was, I just wanted to amend it to read cultivation of cannabis shall not rely on personal gasoline, diesel, propane, or similar fuel power generator.
I need a whole lot more than that. So
That's my amendment, so take it from there.
I want to see what Paul thinks about insulating, even though it's not
That's
in
scary
there.
to me.
So the insulating, I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. I guess it was something that was approved by the generator manufacturer itself. Guaranteed that it wasn't going to cause an overheating of the unit and potentially create some sort of fire off of it. That would be one portion of it that would be acceptable. But if you're just going to go out there with like a welder's blanket and throw it over the top of it, you know, I don't know how that's going to necessarily affect the unit. So insulating to use it for noise control or something to that effect, I definitely understand where that's coming from. However, I do even believe that there's verbiage in there that states that if it is due to a power outage and a state of emergency, that noise ordinance kind of goes away as long as it's not over so many decibels. So that's kind of a weird gray area as well. The other thing with the generators is that they will, depending on the usage, for how long, what it's being used for, how many they've got going, there's a whole plethora there to potentially trigger a hazmat business plan, right? One generator, probably not a problem. 40 generators, probably a problem. So it just kind of depends on the scope of how many generators we're really talking about running. The previous fire code, the 2019 edition, actually didn't govern anything regarding the generators, and actually in there it said that they were strictly prohibited and they weren't endorsed or allowed to be used in any circumstances. The current code states that they are allowed to be used now as long as they provide for adequate vegetation management around the generator, and that they're being used in a manner that is provided by the manufacturer specifications. So, yeah, as far as the insulating them, unless it was something that was approved by each specific generator manufacturer, whoever that may be, or they had a list of products, I don't know if I could necessarily endorse from a fire perspective, because you don't know how it's going to interact with that generator.
I have a question. This says cultivation of cannabis shall not rely on a personal gasoline, diesel, propane, or similar power generator. Does that mean that it could rely on a commercial generator?
That was actually what I'm.
Yeah. And is that the intent of this?
can't stop them.
No, I mean, the intent of it is twofold, to make sure that long-term, that there's appropriate power supply to the property and the project. And then second fold is related to noise, and air quality.
Yeah, so
as well.
Powering a cultivation site off of a commercial generator would still not be considered an acceptable power source, right?
No.
Okay, so then this probably shouldn't say just personal.
The other option with the noise reduction, and it's not necessarily cost effective, and you still have to relate to manufacturer specifications, but if they built like a personal outbuilding for each specific generator.
There are
I mean,
standards for that, yeah.
Yeah, I could dive down a big rabbit hole about ifs and buts with the generators, but it's very interesting.
So it's close.
I have to read.
So I think some of the things to think about, having been in all situations of this, is that I put in a PG&E application in 2019 and I still don't have my power upgrade. And so I think that we need to be cognizant of some of the challenges. And I've had my use permit since 2018. So I did have the right to get that through PG&E. So I think we need to find a safe and equitable way for outdoor cultivation to be able to use permitted generators for a specific duration of time, provided that they can show
continued effort towards acquiring full-time power. And I feel like that's been stated somewhere before in some of these documents.
I think we've been having this conversation with the board of supervisors, and I know that the state is.
I mean, we found a way to make it work with temporary hoop houses. There's got to be a way. I would be hopeful that we could find a way to make this work for outdoor cultivation.
Jen, would a swap on the word emergency to circumstance benefit you? Cultivation of cannabis shall not rely on gasoline, diesel, propane, or similar fuels powered generators as a primary source of power, and shall only allow properly permitted, when applicable, generators for temporary use in the event of a power outage or circumstance that is beyond the party's control. PG&E not granting your thing would be a circumstance be under control, and you would be able to use properly permitted, when applicable, generators.
I would just want to make sure that the interpretation of that is made very clear as we have turnover in project evaluation and leadership. I would want to actually see that. I would want to see that actually spelled out a little further, that waiting for permanent power and being able to show steps forward to do that is one of those.
Yes. So yes, I wouldn't say circumstance. I would say
circumstances which do include.
They would also have to have some sort of inspection.
delay in.
Because there is a there is a generator permit available through the county, and there's requirements for that and how it's hooked up. And so if we're going to do it, let's do it right.
Yeah.
And it also can be hard because, to your point, we've had, all different circumstances. I know as the county, at least under Mireya's leadership, there it is, that we've said, it has to be like a county declared emergency, not like a personal emergency potentially to like a cultivator, for example, or depending on the circumstance, like we have folks that are like actively pursuing, PG&E having their lines dropped, and we have other folks that, maybe aren't as productive and proactive. So it gets really, like you're saying, up to interpretation. I would agree with having the language. I like to know the negative change interpretation.
So I would like to see, I would like to see this language now for the conscious side. A little about face there.
It's okay. It's all very good points.
They would also have to.
So she working.
It's also going to trigger some sort of inspection before they even use anything with the generators, because we're going to have to go out there and make sure that they have adequate defensible space around where these generators are. They can't just go, I got my generator permit and plop it down in a patch of grass and call it a day. So.
And I don't know if currently is the last thing I'll chime in about. I don't know if currently, I'd have to check with Mireya if we would be allowing that under that circumstance where PG&E is taking longer. I just don't want to speak for her. So that's
the often particular. The tax collection is important. I mean, in terms of the county being able to actually recoup some of the cost of providing these permits. If you have to wait to start growing until PG&E shows up, Jen would have paid nothing to the county for the last 5 years. Right.
I'm not saying I'm using generators full time. Just, I do have power.
Yes.
I'm waiting for an upgrade, 3-phase, just so it's on the record.
So what is the noise get inspected then when that's
Well, there's a noise ordinance, right?
So that's what I was kind of getting at though, is I live in Mont Cobb and we have some fairly harsh winters up there, and it's generator country for a week, so 1 a.m., 1 p.m., it doesn't matter. You get generators running the whole time.
In the middle of the night, I get woken up by my neighbor's generator every time there's power in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So.
Part of the rural county.
You would also have to have a tiered compliance system with generators.
And I thought I saw in off of a fuzzy memory, I thought I saw I think it was air quality requirements that they do list like a certain dBA and noise
Yeah, you
Yeah,
have tier,
meaning-
it's tier 4, yeah, or tier 5.
2.5.
Oh, yeah.
So it is the water industry.
Yeah, and it's gotta be, if it's over 50 gallons of fuel storage, then you've got to enroll in Coupa, and there's a whole lot. It's not fun. Nobody's going to elect to do it, especially when red diesel's $4.50 a gallon. If you're lucky.
Okay, so I think we still have a motion that is amended or being amended. We have 5 minutes
Just
left.
waiting for the time to expire.
Yeah, we can table it,
I mean, I wrote something, but I don't know that it will work, so. But it could, if it were to work, it would read, cultivation of cannabis shall not rely on gasoline, diesel, propane, or similar fuels powered generators as a primary source of power and shall only allow properly permitted, where applicable, generators for temporary use in the event of a power outage or circumstance that is beyond the permittee's control, which may include the pursuit of a permanent power source and proof of such on the permittee's behalf. That could be wordsmiths, but that's all. And then let's, we have this language for hoop houses, so we can also grab that.
so are you further amending the amended motion?
Well, so what we need to do is, since there was a motion that was seconded and then it was amended, there's still a second. The second didn't go away. It was just amended. So we need to vote on it, and if the vote is no, that's fine, and that's how we will
Could I say something?
abandon the motion.
Is there any way I can speak up about that?
The public comment period is closed for this item. I apologize. We only have 3 more minutes today.
So what we need to do to move forward is, if we don't like this, just vote no on it, and then we can move forward. If we can't withdraw your motion. I mean,
you don't have to.
We don't have to close it down.
Let's just hear it. Oh, my new motion I just read is, cultivation of cannabis shall not rely on a gasoline, diesel, propane, or similar fuels power generator as a primary.
You shut my business down. You guys will shut my business down doing that.
I keep moving on.
You may have to. We're gonna, Justin, we're gonna ask you to remain muted, please, for the rest of the meeting. Go ahead.
Shall only allow properly permitted, when applicable, generators for temporary use in the event of a power outage that is beyond power outage or circumstance that is beyond the permittee's control, which may include the pursuit of a permanent power source and proof of such on the permittee's. The ending part, where like the proof part, is where I don't love that, but that's, yeah. I mean, that's like where we're heading towards, right?
Sure.
So that's the motion, but I can withdraw it if that's like, we want to, we got 2 minutes and we want to look at it.
Consider the hoop house. I'm trying to find the language, I'm pulling it up. Generator rules be consistent for all cannabis related permits in the Lake County Code and with the Oregon Fire Code, and in fact, at the time of submission of permit application. This is from the Planning Commission meeting, April 13th, 2023. So that was when it was going to approval. So I want to go on to the board after that.
The actual ordinance language, because I can.
Section 5 through 6.25 of Chapter 5, Temporary Act Structures.
You're wanting to add which section? That's what I was.
I'm just looking to see if we can get some consistency between that language and this language, or if there's anything that we want to pull from that, since it's already been discussed by the Board of Supervisors, discussed and approved. I know it was a long conversation over several weeks.
I have the final language.
Mm-hmm. This was the first thing I pulled up on the search of county website.
They're also, I would hate for this to be rushed. You are one.
Yeah, I'll withdraw the motion. We can work on it. That's fine. Not opposed to that.
Okay, what if we include that in the next agenda?
Yeah.
With that draft language discussion?
Keep it. Go ahead. Works for me.
All right, and you withdrew your motion?
Yep, withdrawn.
Okay. All right, well, we are out of time for today. I appreciate everybody's time. It was a really good discussion. Thank you for coming. We will continue.
Public comment? Are you gonna open it for public comment?
Oh, the end. Yes, thank you, Angela. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up, so I know it's in the agenda, that Holly had sent in about asking for more discussion on the annual reports and compliance inspection records. And I know it's been asked several times. Can we put that on the agenda for the next meeting, please?
That is at the discretion of the task force. Let me get with Mireya on that item, because I know we've already discussed that, so I'm just not positive if we want to go back to that or not. But if you care, I will put it in my notes to follow up with her.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, thanks, everyone. We're gonna adjourn. Yeah, Justin, we're gonna talk about the public comment for the last item. Did you have any public comments on non-related items to what we were just discussing? Got about 1 minute. Go ahead.
I don't know if it's non-related. If you're talking about the generator thing, there is no PG&E out here. There's no way to get PG&E out here. What do we do?
Thank you. We're gonna we close the public comment on that section, but we are gonna continue the discussion at the next meeting. So please join that meeting as well. We can further the discussion. All right, we're going.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Adjourn at 2:32 p.m.